Great. Great. We're going to get underway. This is Mike Gaffney from SpecRite. I have Laura Foti, our VP of Marketing, who's going to kick it off. We're going to go through a few slides just to frame the context. We'll jump into the demo quickly after that. If at any time you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat toolbar, and we'll address any questions at the end of the presentation. So take it away, Laura.
Great, thanks, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. During this time, we're all adapting to new ways of living and working as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. And first and foremost, we hope you, your families, and your colleagues are staying safe during this time. Mike and I, the genesis of this webinar is that we've been speaking to a lot of our customers about how they're using specification data management to help them navigate this new reality. And one thing is really clear, it's that specification management is really a need to have, not a nice to have, especially during a time of crisis. So we wanted to share some of these learnings and best practices with you today. All participants will be on mute, but please feel free to chat us and ask any questions. We'd also love to hear from you and understand what are the biggest challenges you're facing right now. So I want to quickly introduce ourselves. Mike Gaffney is our Chief Operating Officer. He's held various leadership positions at software companies and was employee number 20 at Salesforce. And he was telling me the other day how he had to navigate the .com boom while at Salesforce and the bubble. And so he definitely has experience managing challenging business environments. And one thing I want to reiterate is that while the COVID-19 outbreak is a disruption to supply chain, there will be others. So a lot of what we're talking about today, while in the context of the current pandemic, really can be applied to many situations, whether it be a natural disaster like a hurricane, for example. Myself, I'm Laura Foti. I lead marketing at SpecRite. I really started my career in consulting at Deloitte Digital, focusing on digital transformation, and most recently worked at GE. I'm passionate about the intersection of technology and manufacturing, which is more critical today than ever. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to briefly discuss the state of supply chain. I think this is important because many existing challenges are really being compounded by the effects of coronavirus. We're then going to talk about how to use specification management to mitigate risk, how to easily identify impacted parts of your supply chain, how to understand what products and specifications are impacted, and then how to create and move an agile supply chain. Agile is a term that's commonly used with software, but starting to be used for supply chain. It means the ability to have flexibility in your supply chain, to quickly pivot, whether it's to address a new opportunity or to address a crisis. So that's really the focus, is how do you create a digital thread through your supply chain with specification data management, and then how do you use that to enable an agile supply chain and respond to today's environments? What we're seeing is that companies of all industries are dealing with this right now. We're working with people like Procter & Gamble when it comes to consumer packaged goods, or Taylor Farms when it comes to food and beverage, and companies like Corteva Agriscience for chemicals. And really all the underlying challenges and the reasons they've adopted specification management are the same. They need access to more data than ever. They need to be able to share that with their suppliers. And while many of these companies are leading the charge when it comes to specification management, what we're seeing is that the coronavirus pandemic in particular has been a wake-up call for those who may not have been aware of this growing category. And I pulled a sample of Supply Chain Dive headlines over the past few weeks, and I think it's very telling. You know, over half of U.S. manufacturers are expecting some sort of operational impact from the coronavirus. PwC is saying that coronavirus is moving supply chain leaders into the boardroom. It's been a position that, while always important and strategic, is continuously being elevated, especially during a time of crisis. And then this last article was one of the first to come out, and it said 44% of supply chain professionals have no plan for China supply disruption. And what I take away from this is that, supply chain leaders are more important than ever, and they're being expected to do more than ever, but they still don't have the right data or tools they need to operate in these challenging environments. And so let's talk a little bit about the current state. One of the things that we do is we help customers identify their current processes. And I wanted to show this because it reveals that this is what's being compounded, right? Before the pandemic happened, organizations were dealing with many of these challenges. When we look at supply chain and break it down into departments from product development, procurement, packaging, manufacturing, logistics, the current state was that, data isn't in one place. There's duplication of data. They were already spending a lot of time chasing the right information, and this is resulting in things like slower speed to market. As you can imagine, if you add a supply chain disruption like COVID-19, it's difficult for organizations to react if they're still maintaining this status quo of chasing data, relying on suppliers to own parts of their data, or relying on pieces of it to be in an ERP or a spreadsheet. So a lot of this is what organizations are dealing with today, compounded by the effects of dealing with a crisis. So let's talk about the steps that you can take to start mitigating supply chain risk using specification data management. We really break it down into 3 steps. The first step is digitizing your specifications, getting all of that information into a single source of truth so that you don't spend the first few weeks of a crisis trying to chase that information. The second is mapping those specifications together to create this digital thread through your supply chain. A lot of the articles I've been reading around how companies should be responding to the COVID-19 disruption says you need to map your supply chain. We want to actually show you how it's done today. We want to get away from theory and get to tactics because it's more critical than ever that we understand what this actually looks like. The third and very important step is operationalizing it, defining the workflows and approvals and also the reports and dashboards. In a time of crisis, having a command center is critical. Having and being able to surface these insights to executive teams, to regional teams, et cetera, is important. And also being able to quickly trigger workflows to do things like onboard new suppliers, second or third tier suppliers who can fill demand when your tier 1 is impacted. Things like that are more critical than ever. So I want to turn it over to Mike to actually jump in and show how you can use specification data management to mitigate these risks. Mike?
All right, thank you, Laura. So this is the SpecRite homepage that you will see upon logging into the platform. Your homepage view, as well as the tabs at the top, are customizable to the individual. For the purpose of today's demo, I have tabs open for finished goods, packaging, supplier accounts, and several others, but there are many other available tabs like sustainability, machinery, facilities, for example. So that'll be customized to the individual. And while the demo you'll be viewing today is geared more towards food and beverage, SpecRite has customers across every industry, including CPG, cosmetics, durable goods, automotive, and industrials. So for those of you that joined a little bit late, feel free to enter any questions into the question chat bar on the right-hand side, and we'll get to those at the end of the demo. So today's demo is about empowering you in the time of a crisis to centrally view, plan, and activate your backup plan in an agile manner while increasing your chance for success. Many experts have been commenting on the need for supply chain backup and contingency plans, but less readily available is information on how to activate those plans. Okay, so the demo scenario is an unplanned disruption in your supply chain. So let's take a relevant example, and let's say it's a geographic disruption to your supply chain. So let's pick a timely region in Seattle. I'm going to see all of my primary suppliers, secondary suppliers, distribution centers within 100 miles of Seattle. I'm not getting too many hits, so I'm going to broaden the search to 300 miles. And I see that I have several more suppliers, and specifically I'm looking for secondary suppliers that I can quickly activate in this time of crisis and disruption. I can sort them by partner type. And I see that I found 4 secondary suppliers that might be able to fit the bill in terms of helping the current crisis or disruption of my supply chain. I'm going to drill down into one of these accounts, Organics for All. You notice that I'm brought over to the supplier account tab, and everything related to this supplier, relevant contacts, their underlying capabilities, components or ingredients that they're supplying, are all in one central location on this page. Unfortunately, I see that the current status of this supplier is unapproved. Perhaps I haven't worked with them in several months, and their certifications and documentation are not up to date. So I can quickly activate them by kicking off the workflow to get them approved within our process. I can even override some of the normal process for approval in times of crisis, but all within a couple of clicks. I've identified a potential secondary supplier, and I've kicked off the process of activating them. But let's say that your disruption to your supply chain is not geographic, it's more around capacity constraints. So let's say there's a surge in demand for a specific product line within your organization while there's a decrease in demand across other product portfolios. So you want to increase the production of one product either internally within your own organization and facilities or externally through your co-manufacturers and other suppliers. So I'm going to look at my supplier capabilities. And in this case, I'm looking for someone that could handle production of a food product in a gluten-free facility. So I'm looking at all of my suppliers by all of their capabilities. Everything within the UI within SpecRite is very easy to use and navigate. It's all really drag and drop, no programming involved. So I quickly look at all of my partner types. I'm only interested in my secondary suppliers for this use case. So I'm going to drill down and filter only on my secondary suppliers. So I see that there's 12. I can sort that by their different capability, number of lines or locations. But as I mentioned, I'm really looking for somebody that can handle production of my food product in a gluten-free facility. I've quickly identified 3 potential secondary suppliers that likewise, in the earlier example, I can drill into and kick off the process to getting them online. But let's say that it's neither a geographic disruption or a capacity constraint. It's more around the ability for one of my suppliers to supply a component part or ingredient. They're also been affected by the current crisis, so their demand has surged, and I need to find potential partners to fill the void. So I'm going to look at a report that shows my suppliers by specification attached to finished goods. So here's a list, a more holistic report of all of my suppliers and all of the component parts or ingredients or the actual specifications that I'm sourcing from that partner. So let's say Acme has just informed me that they are no longer able to, for the remainder of the month, able to supply me with their specification CO15, their corrugated spec. I can see that it's used in a couple of my finished goods. All of the reports and dashboards are in real time and live, so I can click into these for further information. So let's click into the finished good for the French Rose coffee. I'm brought over to the finished good tab. Now, every piece of data related to this finished good is centralized in one single source of truth here on this page. So everything, including my suppliers, dimensions, packaging specs, subassembly, formulas and ingredients, any quality issues, product lot codes, any relevant files or CAD drawings or diagrams, all in one centralized place. Now, why this doesn't sound that revolutionary, for all of our customers prior to implementing SpecRite, trying to find all of this related information was a game of hunting and pecking in different systems, from their ERP to Excel spreadsheets to PDF files to emails to primarily contacting their suppliers who typically had this specification information because they didn't even have it in-house. So the ability to have this in one centralized view is critical, but it's even more critical in times of a crisis like the current COVID-19 crisis or any general disruption to your supply chain. So I can go into my finished good. I know that the specific specification that's being impacted is being supplied by Acme, which is this CO15 specification. So I'm going to drill directly down to the spec level. So you see now I'm at the packaging tab around the specification record. And just like the finished goods record, everything related to this spec is in one centralized place, including what finished goods it's being used in. And luckily, I see here that I do actually have an alternative supplier for this specification. So I can go ahead and start to activate PNW packaging and see if I can't get that spec from them. 95% of our customers in SpecRite give access to their platform, to their suppliers. This facilitates seamless two-way communication between you and your supplier. Your suppliers and your co-manufacturers can also then update the information directly into your instance of SpecRite. They obviously have a much more limited view of the data. They're not viewing others' information, but it allows for much more seamless communication between the two. So while I'm at the actual specification detail level, I do want to show some of the underlying intelligence that exists in the platform. So let's say I'm creating a new packaging spec or product spec from the ground up, or in this case, I'm just editing an existing one because perhaps I want to move production from one facility to the other, and I'm going to go ahead and change the dimensions of this product. I'm going to go ahead and save it. You see that I'm given a message here saying that changing the dimensions will prevent this package from being run on machine lines number 2, 5, and 10. So this is a very real-world example because a lot of times when you're trying to spin up new manufacturing facilities, either your owned and operated ones or co-manufacturers, there's a lack of visibility to the actual machine's ability to support that product line in those facilities. So we have a customer currently that is experiencing a very high surge in demand. They're a manufacturer of sanitizing wipes. So they were going to try and move some of the manufacturing capability to their UK facilities. They quickly realized that half of the machines were going to be unable to support those product lines. So they weren't going to be able to increase output as much as they originally thought. That could have taken days, if not weeks, to figure out prior to having this in a centralized, digitized, connected universe like SpecRite. So another way that you can quickly drill into your specifications, your suppliers, is through the like item finder. And the like item finder does exactly what it says. It gives you the ability to, first and foremost, not unnecessarily duplicate specification and component parts because you already have them in your portfolio. So it gives you the ability to quickly search and sort your specification portfolio by a number of different filters, be it at the packaging or finished good or ingredient or formula level. For this purpose, we'll use the packaging spec. I want to look at just my corrugated packaging specs. I know that Acme is unable to supply a certain package, so I'm going to look for one that could potentially be a replacement at a length of 17 with a tolerance of 1. I then got a subset of potential suppliers here. Obviously, Acme is not an option because they're the ones that I'm currently having the issue with. China corrugated, I'm currently having a geographic disruption with my suppliers in China, so they're probably not the best alternative, which leaves me with USA paper. But it's just another example of the ability to quickly drill into the data. And we'll drill in during the Q&A. I think one of the big questions is always, how do I get this looks great. My data is all over the place. It's not digitized. It's not in a single source of truth. There's multiple versions on spreadsheets. How do I get it into SpecRite, which we'll answer at the end of the demo. But now that I've kind of figured out my plan of attack in terms of how to activate additional co-manufacturers and suppliers, or over even my own internal facilities that can support the increased production, I'm going to go ahead and show how we can then communicate seamlessly with those suppliers. So go over to the Exchange tab, and since all of my suppliers have access to the SpecRite platform, I can easily go out to bid for new suppliers or existing suppliers with new component parts. I can do things like push and pull on it. So perhaps it's a secondary supplier that I haven't worked with in 12 months. I can quickly push out and say, hey, PNW Packaging, this is the latest specifications I have for the component parts that you were supplying me 12 months ago. Are these the latest and greatest specs? Please confirm, if not, upload the latest ones. Because oftentimes there's an apples and oranges game going on with specifications, that you're not bidding on the actual right product that you're trying to acquire. So this example I'm going to use for a bid. Let's say it's going to be active for 30 days. I'm going to go ahead. I can use any pre-formatted pretty templates and email and attachments that I may want to send to this subset of suppliers. I could use a pre-built grouping of suppliers like that quick view I did on gluten-free facilities. If I save that, I could use that here. Or otherwise, I could just select individual specifications that I want people to provide a bid on. Then the next step is selecting the actual partners and suppliers that I want to have bid on the spec. And within 5 easy steps, I've pulled all of my specification data. I've selected a subset of suppliers and co-manufacturers that I want to receive this in a nice formatted bid. This seems easy, but when we talk to customers prior to implementing SpecWrite, this process takes weeks, if not months, because they have to corral the data first. They have to understand their partner's capabilities. There's a lot of vetting of the data, which you just don't have the time to do when there's an actual disruption in your supply chain. You have to act quickly. You have to act not only quickly, but with confidence that the plans you're putting in place are going to be successful. So we quickly went through some of the tools at your disposal to activate your contingency and backup plans. There's quite a bit more functionality under the hood in our core specification data management, quality management, the ability to tie customer complaints to product lot codes, for example, COAs, machine lines and facilities. We're happy to give a more in-depth demo about a general overview of SpecWrite. So if anybody on the phone is interested in that, please reach out directly to us. Other than that, we'll pause here, and we had several questions come over through the chat, so we'll answer some of those questions as well.
Thanks, Mike. A few questions have come in. Before we dive in, though, just to recap, we talked about, enabling you to map your supply chain. You can see in SpecWrite, not only is that a literal map of being able to see where things are, how they're being disrupted, but also creating that digital thread and being able to, in a few clicks, find a new supplier, find a similar product that you could use, immediately go to bid, immediately verify a specification. That's what we mean by supply chain agility, and not wasting the first few days or weeks of a crisis chasing this data, but immediately jumping in to start to diagnose and implement your contingency plan. So one of the questions we had come in, a really good one, it says, one of our challenges, even when not in crisis mode, is getting information like specs or procedures approved in a timely manner. Can SpecWrite help in cases like this? Absolutely. You can create approval workflows in SpecWrite, not only for internal users, but for external users as well. In some cases, you may want certain approval processes to have more or less steps. And as Mike mentioned, creating approval scenarios where you can automatically trigger advanced approval so you can get a supplier onboarded in time of a crisis. So absolutely, the workflows are extremely flexible and can be designed for a variety of different use cases.
Great. We have a few more questions here. So we don't have access to a lot of this data today. Where should we start? So this is probably the most often asked question of new customers to SpecWrite, because their data is in disarray. So we really kind of recommend, we have a lot of tools and services that can help organize and digitize that data, get it into the platform. So a lot of services we have there, but we do recommend starting with where you're having the biggest challenge, or where's the lowest hanging fruit for you to tackle. So you don't need to tackle all of this out of the gate. You can get up and running with a specific product line, or a new product launch, for example, are always good opportunities to tackle, and then get this data in over time. And since you're giving access to your suppliers, there's an ability to source all of this data from your suppliers. So doesn't rest all on your shoulders.
That's great. We had another question come in. How can you manage new policies or information around the pandemic as it relates to business operations and procedures? This is a great question. One of our customers is actually doing this now and using SpecRite as their command center. When it comes to new policies, most likely with COVID-19, we're looking at things like cleaning, making sure people are doing more hand washing, understanding how to put additional policies in place in manufacturing and distribution facilities. And in SpecRite, what's unique is that you can manage policies as specifications. So you can upload, whether it be a new policy around, manufacturing cleaning, for example, and easily associate that to all of your facilities that it impacts. And then as the situation is ever evolving, for example, with COVID-19, we're seeing reports that it's lasting longer and longer on surfaces, so maybe more cleaning is required. You can go in and update that one policy, and it automatically updates to all of those individual facilities and notifies them that a more recent policy is available. So, viewing things like policies and procedures as specifications, using the power of the SpecRite platform of associating and managing that single policy and attaching it to those facilities, it makes sure that everyone's on the same page, which is more important than ever, especially during a time like this.
Another question came over that my company is using SAP's ERP system, and their IT is currently trying to capture some of this information in SAP. Is it possible for SpecRite to work alongside or integrate with our SAP ERP system? The quick answer is yes. In fact, we integrate with ERP systems probably the most. ERP systems are really meant to manage your general ledger and everything to do around your financial health. It really wasn't built to manage hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of granular specification data. So we can actually help to make ERPs run more efficiently. So we'll capture all of that granular information that operators need to manipulate and use at that level and manage their suppliers, and then integrate the relevant information back to the ERP system, which is typically related to purchase orders and bill of materials. What our observation is that when customers try to manage this entirely within their ERP system, it can get 30 or 40% of the way there, and they start managing all of the specification data once again in spreadsheets surrounding that, and they're right back at square one. So absolutely, we can integrate with your ERP system.
Great. I think we have time for one last question. I have a really good one here. Supply chains are increasingly global. How do you manage this added layer of complexity during a time of crisis? With a specification data management platform like SpecRite, all of the fields are actually auto-translated. So, if they're in Mandarin because you have a supplier in China and you need to shift that elsewhere, we support a variety of different languages: Japanese, Spanish, Korean, English, etc. And also, any unit of measurement is automatically converted, so you don't have to worry about operating in one country that's using the metric system and then having to translate your specs if you need to move them elsewhere. Our platform automatically does that to present it to the user in whatever language or unit of measurement is applicable to their home base. So things like that, again, when we think about a time of crisis, it's all about enabling you to operate faster, more confidently, not worrying about things getting lost in translation. And that's what we aim to show you today. So hope that you all are staying safe during this time. Mike and I and other leaders in the company are happy to connect with you one-on-one to help make sure that we can support you during this time. And we thank you for your participation and hope to speak with you soon.
Thanks, everyone. We'll follow up with a link of the recording of the webinar. Please feel free to share it with your colleagues. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out directly. Take care, everybody. Thanks.